In a democracy, the rulers have to follow some rules and procedures. They have to work with and within institutions. In a democratic country, representatives are chosen through elections at various levels. The highest formal authority in the country and head of the state is the President. Prime Minister is the head of the government and actually exercises all governmental powers. He takes most of the decisions in the cabinet meetings. Government of India appointed a commission in 1979 headed by BP Mandal called Second Backward Commission. The Mandal Commission gave its report in 1980 and made many recommendations. One of these was that 27% of government jobs be reserved for the socially and educationally backward classes. In 1992, Supreme Court declared the Mandal order as valid but asked for some modifications. In order to settle any disputes, modern democracies have arrangements called institutions whose powers and functions are decided by the Constitution. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet are institutions that take all important policy decisions. The civil servants working together are responsible for taking steps to implement the minister's decisions. Supreme Court is an institution where disputes between citizens and the government are finally settled. The parliamentary discussions influence and shape the decisions of the government. The important function of Parliament is to make, change laws and implement new laws and is the final authority of lawmaking in the country. Parliaments control all the money that governments have. In most countries, the public money can be spent only when Parliament sanctions it. Parliament is the highest forum of discussion and debate on public issues and national policy in any country. In India, the two houses are the Council of States or Rajya Sabha or Upper Chamber and House of the People or Lok Sabha or Lower Chamber. The President of India is a part of Parliament but not a member of either house. The Rajya Sabha has special powers over states, but Lok Sabha exercises supreme power. Any ordinary law needs to be passed by both the houses, but if there is a difference between the two houses, the final decision is taken in a joint session in which the members of both the houses sit together. Lok Sabha exercises more powers in money matters. Once the Lok Sabha passes the budget of the government or any other money-related law, the Rajya Sabha cannot reject it, but can only delay it by 14 days. If the majority of the Lok Sabha members say they have no confidence in the Council of Ministers, all ministers, including the Prime Minister, have to quit. The Rajya Sabha does not have this power. Executives are divided into two categories: political executive and permanent executive or civil services. Political executives are the political leaders who make big decisions. Permanent executives are people appointed on a long-term basis. Permanent executive, also called civil servants. The Prime Minister, appointed by the President, is the most important political institution in the country. The President appoints the leader of the majority party or the coalition of parties that commands a majority in the Lok Sabha as Prime Minister. After the appointment of the Prime Minister, the President appoints other ministers on the advice of the Prime Minister. A person who is not a member of Parliament can also become a minister, but such a person has to get elected to one of the Houses of Parliament within 6 months of appointment as minister. The body of 60 to 80 ministers of different ranks is called Council of Ministers, which includes cabinet ministers, ministers of state with independent charge, and ministers of state. Parliamentary democracy in most countries is often known as the cabinet form of government. Prime Minister chairs cabinet meetings and coordinates the work of different departments. Prime Minister decisions are final in case disagreement arises between departments. If the Prime Minister quits, the entire ministry quits. The parliamentary democracies are sometimes seen as prime ministerial form of government. The President is the head of the state and exercises nominal ceremonial powers. The President supervises the overall functioning of all the political institutions in the country so that they operate in harmony to achieve the objectives of the state. The President is not elected directly by the people. The elected members of Parliament and the elected members of the legislative assemblies elect him or her. All governmental activities take place in the name of the President. All laws and major policy decisions of the government are issued in her name. Some appointments made by President include Chief Justice of India, Judges of Supreme Court and High Court in consultation with Chief Justice, Governor of States, Election Commissioners and Ambassadors to other countries. The President is the Supreme Commander of the Defence Forces of India. President exercises all these powers only on the advice of Council of Ministers. The President can ask the Council of Ministers to reconsider its advice, but if the same advice is given again, he or she is bound to act according to Council of Ministers. A bill passed by the Parliament becomes a law only after the President gives assent to it. When no party or coalition gets a majority in Lok Sabha, the President exercises her discretion and appoints a leader. The leader should prove his majority in order to stable the government. The Indian judiciary consists of a Supreme Court for the entire nation, high courts in the state, district courts and the courts at local level. India has an integrated judiciary. Supreme Court controls the judicial administration in the country and lower courts should bind to Supreme Court's decision. It is the highest court of appeal in civil and criminal cases. It can hear appeals against the decisions of the high courts. Independence of the judiciary means that Supreme Court is not under the control of the legislature or the executive. The judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court are appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister and in consultation with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The senior most judge of the Supreme Court is usually appointed by Chief Justice. Once a person is appointed as judge of the Supreme Court or the High Court, it is nearly impossible to remove him. It is as difficult as removing the President of India. The Supreme Court and the High Courts have the power to interpret the Constitution of the country. They can declare invalid any law of the legislature or the action of the executive, whether at the union level or at the state level. Supreme Court can determine the constitutional validity of any legislation or action of the executive in the country. This is known as the judicial review. The powers and the independence of the Indian judiciary allow it to act as the guardian of the fundamental rights. Anyone can approach the courts if public interest is hurt by the actions of government. This is called public interest litigation.